Anyway, so I'm going to talk about Mariupol, which is this city in eastern Ukraine. It's on the coast on the Sea of Azov. The Sea of Azov is very enclosed, but opens out to the Black Sea. I know the Black Sea itself is fairly enclosed, and then you can sail through the Bosporus there. That's the Turkish waters out into the Aegean, the Mediterranean, to every other sea. Um, but Russia's been besieging Mariupol since the beginning of the war over 50 days ago. And it's a staggering indictment of the Russian military. They still haven't managed to take that city. And I can't imagine how the defenders of Mariupol have managed to, to hold out for so long. So the world is staring in amazement at this doughty and staunch defence of that city, which has largely been reduced to rubble by this incessant pounding by Russian artillery and by missile strikes. But it looks like it can't hold out much longer. Admittedly, people have been saying that for a few weeks now, and the gallant defenders of the city have defied all expectations and held out much longer than anybody thought possible. But even that's going to come to an end. Now, Russia claimed that the defenders were capitulating in droves, but of course, I wouldn't credit a word that the Russian lie machine says. Some of them have surrendered, but you have to assume it's a lie unless you can actually prove what they're saying is true. Your starting point must be thinking it's a lie because they lie just so much and so flagrantly. Um, but so they called upon the defenders of Mariupol to surrender today and to vacate their buildings by 11 o'clock this morning. Looks like they haven't done so. And if they did so, then their lives would be guaranteed. But wait a second. Prisoners of war is guaranteed anyway under the Geneva Convention. So implicitly that's saying they would murder prisoners of war otherwise, which of course there is ample evidence that the Russian military has done on a huge scale in this war. They're not fighting against terrorists. The Ukrainian army is an army of a sovereign state recognized by every country in the world, including by Russia. And Russia hasn't officially de-recognized Ukraine, and they're fighting in a uniform. They're abiding by the laws of war. They're absolutely entitled to use their weapons to defend their homeland. No question about that. Um, so why do we allow surrender? Why do you have rules saying if someone surrenders, you mustn't kill him, torture him, or mistreat him? Well, that's to save lives on both sides. Not so many attackers get killed because they don't have to fight to the bitter end. If you're a defender surrounded, cut off, if you believe if you surrender you're going to be killed anyway, in which case you might as well fight on to the bitter end. Or if you surrender, you might going to be tortured or somehow horrifically treated. Again, there's more an incentive to fight on to the end, because then if you at least get killed by a bullet to the head, that'd be an instant death, a less painful death, or whatever, or have the satisfaction of knowing you took a few of your enemies down with you. So that's why we have these laws of war. Um, so anyway, Russia wants Mariupol because then it will complete that land corridor from Russia to Crimea. Crimea is that Ukrainian peninsula that Russia seized over 8 years ago. And once they have that, it'll be good news for them. Otherwise, they have to ship things in to Crimea. They're a bit worried because, of course, the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, a ship called Moskva, was sunk by a Ukrainian Neptune missile the other day. So that was quite a blow to the Russian Navy's prestige. Surprised the Ukrainians haven't done this to far more ships. There's also a bridge across the Kerch Strait connecting Russia to Crimea. But I'm astonished that the Ukrainians haven't managed to blow that up. They've not even tried, because that would create more of a logistical nightmare for the Ruskies. Um, okay, but once Mariupol falls, that will free up a lot of Russian units to attack elsewhere. And of course, Russia's been building up for a large offensive in eastern Ukraine to try and take the whole of Donbass region and the Luhansk region. Remember, just before this war began, Russia recognized these renegade provinces as independent countries, and that's obviously preparatory to their absorption into the Russian Federation. We know this because Sergei Narishkin and the Russian National Security Council let slip. He said, yes, we're going to recognize part of Russia, and Putin was amused, surprisingly, saying that's not what we're discussing. Are we going to recognize them as sovereign states? And in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, some people there in the Russian illegally occupied territories of Georgia have said, well, we want to join Russia too, properly. Anyway, what else has Russia done recently? They banned Boris Johnson, most of the British cabinet, from ever visiting the Russian Federation. Not that they were likely to be united in the near future anyhow, on the basis of their hostility. Well, don't think Boris Johnson or anyone else is anti-Russian. He's made all sorts of pro-Russian statements previously. I mean, he was anti-Putin. He's certainly anti-aggression, and so he will regard it as a badge of honour. Nicola Sturgeon and other British politicians have been forbidden to visit Russia because they're, of course, arming the Ukrainians to the teeth. Now, to some extent, it's a guilty conscience because London was a sewer, filthy money from Russia. Not suggesting that every wealthy Russian is dodgy at all, but some of them are. Now, it's got much more difficult to get dirty money into the United Kingdom in the last few years. There's unexplained wealth orders, civil action where like, the money is the defendant. But because it's a civil action, um, you only need to prove on the balance of probabilities that it's yours, and then you can keep it. You don't need to prove it to the criminal standard. Okay, so there have been all sorts of other actions taken against Russia, and they're having difficulty paying off their debts, trying to pay in rubles. It looks like they're in default, but they're in their grace period, trying to pay in rubles. No, 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 you've got to pay in dollars. So anyway, Finland and Sweden are moving towards NATO membership, which Russia would take to very badly. I mean, I think they should hurry up and done it already, and then Russia couldn't do anything about it because Russia's got to concentrate so much on Ukraine. So the Chancellor of Austria visited Moscow recently, had a tete-a-tete with Putin. But I mean, the Austrian Chancellor said, Nehammer said, that Vladimir Vladimirovich, in his own mind, sees Russia as winning this war. Perhaps his own generals are fibbing to him about how well it's going. So it's fairly bad news for Russia, but I think it's going to get better because they can attack on just one axis from the east. The logistical problems won't be so severe. That area will be covered by Russian air defense. The thaw has come. They can drive off road. Their vehicles are going to sink in the mud. They've got a bloody nose in northern Ukraine. They might have learned these very painful lessons, and they might fight more effectively in eastern Ukraine. So just because Ukraine won the Battle of Kiev, that doesn't prove they're going to win the Battle of Donbass, and I think they're not. Um, so they might have finally sorted it out. They might have called up more troops and things like that. Now the Russians have got the measure of the Ukrainians. They're not so cocksure anymore. They were too complacent because they were overconfident. They didn't provide their troops with sufficient rations, ammunition, or anything else. Now, because they assault, that's why Zelensky's saying that Putin is considering a tactical nuclear strike, nuclear weapons to just take out one city, not to take out more, which he may yet go for. But then the West is going to decide what its response is going to be. Not a doubt that in advance have some strategic ambiguity. So Russia's not quite sure what the reactions are going to be, and therefore doesn't dare do it because the reaction might be too strong. Anyway, and once Mariupol falls, then Russia will have another port to be able to ship things into the Sea of Azov, and again, their logistic problems will be somewhat eased. So it's a very inhuman situation for Mariupol. Ukrainians claim over 10,000 civilians have been killed there. I mean, I imagine they've inflated the figure, but there's no doubt that a large number of civilians have been killed there, probably several thousand. Some of it by malice, some of it just by accident, collateral damage. It's a building, the enemy fighters there, the civilians. Are you going to blow out? Most armies would, and so the civilians get killed. However, if you purposefully kill civilians, knowing there are no soldiers around, and not a military target at all, then yes, that is murder. That would be a war crime to kill civilians deliberately, not as part of an attack on any military force. And anyway, Zelensky said if the defenders of Mariupol are killed, presumably means after capture, there'll be no more talks because talks are being ongoing throughout this, hosted by Turkey, hosted by Belarus, and so on. So it doesn't look like much headway has been made there, and NATO's shipping weapons to Ukraine an awful lot. And Russia said, "Oh, we'll stop doing this because you're fueling the conflict." No, actually, Russia is entirely responsible for the conflict. They're allowing Ukraine to defend itself is not fueling the conflict, and it could lead to unpredictable consequences. Well, the conflict already has led to unpredictable consequences for Russia, as it's been much worse. Russia could end this conflict like today, like stop fighting, withdraw, go back to your own country, stop interfering, stop carrying out these crimes against humanity, and then we'd all be better off. And I don't blame the ordinary Russian people who've had the wool pulled over their eyes. They're poor dupes, really. Yeah, this conflict's there's no sign it's going to come to an end. It's not being abated. It's not being de-escalated. I mean, I didn't think it would last this long. Yeah, I'll go on to July at least, because remember, Putin called up some civilian young men up to the age of 27. Their period of military service will last the 1st of July. Thank you for watching my channel, and please donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79 at gmail.com. Toodaloo.